episode 229. Welcome to Data Skeptic, a podcast about data science and fake news from an algorithmic perspective. Here's your host, Kyle Polich.
Arlinda, our topic for today is click-through rates, or CTRs, as you call them if you're in the business.
Yeah, that's where when we met, we were very much, or rather you were very much doing ads, click-through rates and stuff.
Yes, I was actively working in ad tech at the time.
Ad optimizations or something, keywords.
Yeah, that was a piece of it for sure. So do you know how ads work online? Well, actually, they work in a number of different ways. Let's talk specifically about Google AdWords and ads on Bing and Yahoo and sites like that.
So what's the question? That's a very broad question.
What is your understanding of search ads?
Well, you've told me some because this is your background. People go in and they bid on a word, like bird. Based on who else is competing for the word, that will determine, like the stock market, whether the rate goes up or down.
Yeah.
And
There's an auction model at work.
Yeah, Google will determine that based on the competition
The
and the
Vickery
cost.
auction,
Also
yes.
determines the cost. And then when you search parrot and I click on it, you get billed. If you're the advertiser,
right,
you get billed.
So what kind of ads do you think would show up if we searched for parrot?
The most common one is parrot food, but there's two different kinds of ads. You could do retargeting, which is someone who already searched the word parrot or for parrot food.
You're getting a little deep, yeah.
You just show them, if you're advertising, for example, Dr. Foster's is a brand of parrot food. Dr. Foster's might retarget. Well, technically, I would go to Dr. Foster's website, and then I would go somewhere else, and then I would see the same ad.
Are you sneaking in a new sponsor here?
No, just saying.
So you're highlighting one important detail, and that's that in the advertising world, there is a wide spectrum of different types of products you could buy and different ways that they're sold. For example, the sort of old-fashioned way of doing things is to sell by impression. That has like an old school like newspaper kind of vibe to it. Regardless of if anyone looks at an ad or even turns to that page or whatever, if you showed it to someone, you get paid a very small amount of money per person. Usually it's, a certain amount per 1,000. And that model doesn't work very well because people can abuse the system, right? You get a rate locked in and then you just drive garbage traffic to your site. You try and buy just cheaper traffic from anywhere, and generally you get really low-quality responses. At the other end of the spectrum, you could do CPA, cost per acquisition, or cost per action, where the publisher who shows the ad on their site, they only get paid if something happens, like an actual purchase got made at that parrot food store. Do you see the disadvantage to that one?
Well, I don't think that's how Google works. Google just gets paid if you click. Someone clicks on it.
Well, that's where we're headed.
Doesn't mean they buy.
Yeah, why wouldn't somebody want CPA ads?
Well, actually, if you're the one with the budget, you're going to be happy.
Very happy.
It's the advertiser that wouldn't be happy.
That's right.
They still showed you the ad.
The publisher.
Yeah, whoever the platform is where you see the ad, or whoever the cost is for providing the ad.
Yeah.
Whoever owns that ad space will be unhappy because they'll be saying, well, we still made an impression,
Yeah, like what if we took on an advertiser who was like a jet selling company, and they said, we'll pay you, but only if someone from your listening audience buys a jet. It's probably not going to happen ever. So they get free ads, basically, or ads at no cost.
Yeah, but it's not really fair because even
Right.
if you advertise on, for example, a car, most people might buy a car once every 5 or 4 years or something. And that's probably on the more frequent end. So even if you advertise for a car and I didn't make a purchase within that exact moment, you still made an impression on me because I might remember 5 years down the road. So it's not necessarily fair.
Yeah, you're making an excellent point. They'll call this concept reach and frequency versus actual acquisition. You want to get the brand awareness out, stuff like that. So we're getting a little off topic, but we're now at the point where we can say there's a middle ground, right? There's pay per impression at one extreme, pay per action at the other, and in the middle would be pay per click, which is the way I don't know about most, but a large volume and certainly the best internet advertising, in my opinion, seems to work. And that's just like how Google AdWords does it. You pay only when someone clicks on your ad on Google. And whether or not you convert them to a customer, that's on you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you think people should just, whoever pays the higher price should just win the auction and immediately get their ad shown at the top?
I don't know.
Well, the problem there would be if you say, hey, we'll put you to the top if you offer a very high cost per click. What if no one clicks on your ad? So yeah, you're offering like, oh, I'll pay you $100 for every click. But if your ad says like, hey, we have the worst parrot food in the business, we've only had 4 fatalities in the last week, no one wants to click on that ad, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then Google, after some point, would, or whoever is the advertising platform, would have to say, oh, we don't want to show this ad, or you have to pay us more money, or some combination of the two. And they do that, or one of the key metrics to do that is this click-through rate. So you let it run for a little while. Usually there's a Bayesian approach involved here because you don't want to run it for too long. But you just assess and you say, on average, how many people are clicking on your ad? That is one of the components that establishes your price. If you have a high click-through rate, that is not only good for the publisher, the search engine, who means they're going to get paid more, but it also is a signal. Do you know what it signals to them?
What does what signal?
Having a high click-through rate.
Well, maybe the ad's working.
Well, it's attracting people, that's for sure, right? People are interested in that ad related to the search term.
Yeah.
So if you search for parrot food and you get that vendor you mentioned, and they click it, that's good. If you search for parrot and you get some Jimmy Buffett stuff and no one clicks on it, well, obviously it's going to have a low click-through rate, and at some point the search engine can say, oh, we're going to show this less often. There's a concept here called a rank. And a rank is usually an integer that says, on a search result page, which ad did you click? So assuming there's multiple ads, the first position is rank 1, second position rank 2, so on and so forth. What do you think is the shape of the distribution of frequency over the ranks?
So the rank is how high up in the page your ad shown?
So rank 1 is the top position.
So then what's your question?
Let's just say the ad in position 1 gets a 7% click-through rate. That would probably actually be really good. What do you think the ad in rank 2 would get?
5%.
And what about rank 3?
Maybe like 3%.
So far you've been linear. What about rank 4?
It's going to be like 2%.
Oh, less than linear now. Okay, so you got the basic idea of it. Yeah, it tends to be not linear, that's for sure. It does drop off rather suddenly.
It'll drop off rapidly. People are just going to click on the first one and move on.
Yeah, most of the time. Some people do explore more and that sort of thing. Typically, I have seen that model a couple of different ways. The way I've used, I think, the most is with like an exponential distribution, so it drops off very fast. The problem you can run into there is if you're just doing curve fitting, and you have some extreme data because like you only have representative data in like positions 1 and 2, like you were advertising and generally paying a high price, you don't see the whole distribution. Then just asking some library to do this simple curve fit, sometimes it comes up with nonsensical answers. So you might do something like make it half of a Gaussian or something like that, so that you're basically controlling for the fact that you might have a lot of top-heavy data and not see the full tail of the curve. And there's actually a lot of work to be done here to fine-tune that. You can do all these kind of Bayesian approaches and stuff like we did, or there's probably smarter ideas too now, that just kind of figure out a way to predict the click-through rate you would get based on the rank. So at the end of the day, that's mostly what you want to model, is what's the amount of traffic you can get based on your position in the search results.
So I'm sure they've done this before, so what is it?
Well, like I said, it varies, and there's a high amount of there's a really high variance across each position and across the different search terms and all that. So I'm hesitant to say that everything fits one law, because this is one area of statistics where you just don't get beautiful curves. It's not like, I once had a project that was dealing with a phone center and like how often calls came in. And when we plotted the data, everything like perfectly fit a Poisson distribution, like absolutely perfectly, textbook stuff. Sometimes in applied statistics, you find very textbook distributions, but this is one of those cases when you never do. The click-through rates you'll observe, the empirical data has so much noise and variance in it. I'm hesitant to say it for sure fits any distribution. But if I had to pick one, I'd say exponential.
So it varies across search terms.
Yeah, and across what the platform you're looking at is, and just week to week, there's a high amount of volatility to it. There's just so much dynamicism to it, I guess, that You have to have very adaptive models to make any progress. Now, I've so far talked about all this in the context of ads, but of course it works anywhere. In organic search results, it can work on Facebook. Like, how do you think click-through rate would work on Facebook?
I don't know. How do you think? I mean, like, I thought the click-through rate was how many people click through. So that's calculated the exact same across the board.
Well, those are your click-throughs. The formula for the rate is the number of clicks, or probably the unique clicks, divided by the impressions, or maybe the unique impressions.
Right. So isn't that across the board?
Yeah.
So
Very
Facebook
standard.
is calculating the same way.
Yeah, so they must, I don't have any insider information here, they must have some sort of little like pixel or something that fires so they know you actually saw the story, because there's so much, infinite scrolling going on. They have to get a measurement of if you actually saw something, and then so clicks over that would be their click-through rate. Now, another complication, I can almost guarantee that click-through rates are astronomically low on Facebook. I can't imagine they're above 1%. How many of the stories you see on Facebook do you actually click on?
I think a lot, actually. I think that the
10%?
click-through rate would be high. Here's the thing. Obviously, it depends on the product and the search term and whatever, what you're trying to go for and what
Facebook's
motivates.
just Facebook.
Yeah, but your ad.
Oh, not even the ad, the regular content.
Oh, you're talking about Facebook
Just like,
regular
yeah,
content.
like here's somebody
click-through.
doing dishes when they put the pictures up and all that,
Well, Facebook, first of all, they curate what they show you.
Yes, there's some algorithmic curation, but
That click-through rate is most likely to be higher, if only because if they don't think you like it or interact with it, then they will be less likely to show it to you. So it's got to be higher than what you just said.
well, so you're raising an interesting point. We know that they have algorithmic ranking, and certainly click-through rate must play some role in that. I don't know how much, but I can't imagine that's not a component in how they show something. And the higher the click-through rate.
Well, Facebook's got likes.
Yeah, so likes are another
You
metric.
could comment. They're just talking about engagement. When you're talking about social media, the term is engagement.
If I worked at Facebook, what I would want to work on would be studying the hover time, because it's so much about scrolling. How long do people wait before they move on to something else? That would be an interesting sort of equivalent metric to me that's not a click-through rate, but it's a more robust statistic, because click-through rates are, I think, going to be fleetingly rare, but you think they're higher.
Well, I was just also talking engagement. So Facebook is already using their engagement levels.
So why can't they look at click-through rate and engagement and use that as a way to filter out fake news?
I'm sure that well, first of all, it wasn't their goal to filter out fake news until the government put them in this position and everyone's demanding it.
Well, my name's Madi, and I have a kind of an odd path to data science. I was working in the international development and policy space for years in DC, and eventually got a little burnt out on that. I think I kind of plateaued on the self-study front, so then that's when I returned to Galvanize.
Thanks to this week's sponsor, Galvanize. Mari is an alumni of their data science program.
I realized that I loved data science. I loved being able to turn statistics and programming into something more meaningful.
Galvanize is a 13-week full-time immersive program.
It was an amazing experience. It was 3 months of super intense work and fun, and I got a ton out of it.
The daily instruction from industry veterans prepare students for building capstone projects that exhibit the skills they learned.
I learned the ins and outs of natural language processing. I decided to build off of that for my capstone, and I worked with a friend of mine from grad school who's starting her own nonprofit focused on maternal health and nutrition. New mothers, when they're trying to figure out what they should be eating, they're often bombarded by information. So I built a classifier to help them determine whether or not the article that their great aunt Sally has sent them is actually legitimate nutrition information or if it's clickbait.
The Galvanize data science program teaches Python, statistics, machine learning, natural language processing, as we heard, as well as the tools and processes required to be a successful industry professional.
One of the most valuable things that I learned was the crisp DM approach to designing and building data science solutions. Now that I'm a consultant, I've used that in practice to be able to frame the question out the gate in a proper way and then tackle it.
If you'd like to learn the crisp DM process or the other skills of a data scientist, visit galvanize.com/dataskeptic. There you can learn more about Galvanize's program. Thanks again to Mari for sharing her Galvanize story. Once again, learn more by visiting galvanize.com/dataskeptic.
I mean, I don't just click on things willy-nilly.
What if there's like a link that says click here to get a free $200 gift card?
Well, I'm one step closer to getting that gift card. I better be.
But you know it's fake. There's always a string attached, like you can only spend it in the dataskeptic.com store or something like that.
We would never. I am offended that you would even suggest that we have click-through bait.
Have you been on the internet?
But not Data Skeptic. We are the one.
Yeah, we aren't. In fact, we don't rank as highly as we could on the web if we did more of that. There's a lot of these data science sites that put up a lot of that clickbait stuff. So why don't you give me your definition of clickbait while we're at it?
Well, I will tell you my most annoying pet peeve is when I'm trying to do something on a website. Like, I go to the DMV, and they might have an ad that says, but the ad looks like a giant submit button. And I think that the ad is actually part of the form. So I fill everything out and I'm like, yes, click this button. And I click the ad instead. And I'm like, no. So I hate it when they have an ad that hints that it's part of the form or whatever it is I'm trying to do. Because I not always, I will often accidentally click it and won't know that it's the wrong thing until I see it and then I have to go back. So to me, that is clickbait. They're trying to fake me out because they know the only way I would click is by accident.
So I know what you're talking about, but I don't know if most people would call that clickbait.
What is it?
So I think what you're talking about is more like click manipulation, like trying to just very blatantly trick people into clicking on something. Clickbait, in my mind, means more like they put up something that is not true that you're interested in. So, for example...
Well, it's not true, too, because I clicked through and it has absolutely nothing to do with what they said. It's not true.
But, I mean, it was not true on the site. It was like, oh, this is your submit button, but it's not. Recently, I want to know when the new season of Doctor Who will begin. And there are people posting articles saying, like, click here to find out the, premiere date. And no one knows it. It's
so
a
the
fake
ad
article.
says that?
Yeah, they'll say stuff like that. And then if you click it, it'll either be nonsense or it'll be like a fake article of pseudo content of people saying like, oh, no one knows when the release date is.
So you think that's bait? That's blatant lying to me.
Well,
which is exactly the thing I described, except mine is more situational.
Yeah, but I feel like yours can be determined from the content of the page. Someone who, if you looked at the HTML, you would be like, oh, well, that's not a button, that's an image. In mine, you're like, oh, maybe you do have the answer. Let me go read that article.
Well, I think in both of our situations, we both are trying to find a solution to a problem we have.
Mm-hmm. And what's the solution? Don't go on the internet?
Well, I just accidentally clicked on the wrong part of the page, that's all.
Yeah, and so there are people actively working to manipulate you to click on things that you would not have clicked on after the fact, right?
Yeah, so I think that's clickbait. Here's the only thing, it just appeals to two different audiences, because I don't typically click on ads that have some, paparazzi photo or something, because I pretty much assume they're lying. Whereas when I think it's part of the page I was intending to go to, that's the one more likely that's going to get me.
This is kind of a rabbit hole I don't want to go down today, but I think we've gotten to the core moral of the story here. While click-through rates are a nice metric, it's better than pay per impression and it's better than pay per action because it sort of meets more in the middle, so it's more fair to both the publisher and the platform. The fact that people have selected that metric, that trait to do billing and things for ads and stuff like that, means that Goodhart's law has kicked in, that we talked about a long time ago, that as soon as you establish a metric, someone will try to manipulate that metric. And that's what's essentially the basis for all of clickbait.
Trying to manipulate this metric.
Yeah. If the goal is get someone to click, push this button, then they're going to find all types of ways to make people push the button, either accidentally or on purpose.
Yep.
Is the internet just going to be a place where people are tricking you in the future?
Well, that's why we're all talking about fake news. Has the internet become that? there's also emails that look like it's like, oh, account recovery. They make it look very much like the real thing because they want to get my information. We do have to be careful as internet users.
Yeah, that I would call a phishing scam.
Well, I didn't say it was a click. Well, they do want you to click through, technically.
It's not the click they're after. It's your login information, something you'll do after you click.
Well, that's all the ads after you go there.
No, not necessarily. You know, like if I went and posted an article on dataskeptic.com and I was like, Ian Goodfellow says deep learning doesn't work at all. You know, I would post that and people would click on it because they were like, oh, that's interesting. And then they would get to the article and be like, oh, it has nothing to do with Ian. Ian Goodfellow didn't even comment in this. But because I took someone's name and I manipulated people into clicking, then they arrived at our page and there's an ad on the page and we're, maybe going to get paid a little bit because they saw the ad.
Yep, I can see that.
So the very nature of internet advertising has promoted not just click-through rate as a metric, which I don't think is a problem, but it has now, because of Goodhart's law that we covered in a previous episode that'll be linked to in the show notes, has created a whole ecosystem of people trying to generate, I don't want to call them fake clicks, they're real clicks, they're clicks from actual people.
Low quality clicks.
So how do we fix it?
I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think people need to listen to this entire semester of Data Skeptic because we're going to cover a lot of stuff like that. But
I think people should get educated.
Well, I mean, that's generally the solution to anything, but how are you going to enforce it?
Well, you don't enforce education.
Mm-hmm. So there's your problem.
But that's a question, when you're talking about enforcing, as a project manager, my first question is, well, who's responsible? You have to point the finger because you can't just make up a solution and not attach someone to do it.
So who do you think is responsible for fake news?
The investigations hint that Facebook did encourage people to read fake news. That's the findings
What do you mean?
that I read. I didn't read the report, but those are the headlines I saw.
So you just read the headlines too.
Well, apparently Facebook admitted it, so I was like, well, if Facebook
I don't know if
admits
that's
it,
true.
well, that's the headline I read.
That sounds like fake news to me.
But here's the thing. Let's assume it's true.
Okay.
If you admitted it, then I'm okay to blame you. Especially Facebook. But who is responsible? Google? I think Google.
You could point the finger at Google. That's
I'll point at Google.
Mm-hmm.
I'll point it at any networks that are and servers.
What about AOL?
Servers that are hosting fake news.
Mm-hmm. How about GeoCities?
I don't know. Are they hosting it?
Oh, Lord only knows. I haven't been there in a long time.
But
wait, why should hosting matter?
because you could take it down. We take down illegal things.
But if I just go on Twitter and I'm like, hey, Donald Trump resigns the presidency, should Twitter take down my tweet?
Is that an opinion or is that something you're posing as fact?
I'm just going to tweet that.
It has to be truly, well, if you're tweeting, it's clearly editorial in nature. So we can allow that. Sure, you can talk about that, I guess.
Well, I think we're stumbling a little bit into like First Amendment stuff, and that's kind of outside of our scope.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
I guess our topic for today of CTRs, click-through rates, the thing I want to stress here is that is a very logical metric that a lot of sites have adopted in order to decide what is the best content to show or to promote or things like that. But because you have selected that as a metric, then people try and manipulate that metric. And one of the, so you could manipulate it through fake clicks, right? Bot networks and stuff like that. And people have tried that. And to some degree, you can filter that out algorithmically. But ultimately, if real people are clicking on real things, you're not going to filter it. How could you? Because they're real by definition. So we're now in a world where if I write something sensational or ridiculous or whatever, as long as I get the click, I get a point. I get qualification that I delivered a user to a destination.
So what are you talking about?
So I'm saying that while click-through rates is a nice metric, because we have selected it, we kind of in the royal sense that sites use that other people then have tried to manipulate it, and that the very existence of click-through rates is one of the major causes of fake news.
So then what should we change it to?
Oh, I don't know. That's a little bit beyond the scope of this mini episode, but I hope people walk away understanding that click-through rates are not inherently a wrong idea, but their selection, and certainly if they were the only qualification for how we rank content, then we'd have much worse fake news than we do.
Okay. Well, that's the takeaway.
Okay, one last fun little bit to share some insider knowledge I have about this kind of stuff, because I've done a lot with this. Let's talk real quick. We've gotten into click-through rates. You know about conversion rates, right?
Okay, conversion rates.
What's
Usually
that?
it means when you check out and you paid for something.
Yeah. The best case scenario is like I go on Google AdWords or some ad platform or whatever, put up an ad for Data Skeptic t-shirts. And people who click on that ad are brought to the store at dataskeptic.com. And if they buy the t-shirt, that's called a conversion. I'm paying for those ads maybe, and however many people I bring in, if one out of whatever of them buys a t-shirt, then it's break even, right?
Yeah.
So the conversion rate is of those who arrive at your site, how many do the action you want, make a purchase, sign up for the list, join the site, whatever. Do you suppose that click-through rates, the rank of the click-through rate, would help me determine what the conversion rate will be?
Determine?
Yeah.
I mean, you're not setting. You mean estimate
Like
or
basically,
project. Yeah, of course.
people who
Well,
maybe click on ads and
for
rank
just
them.
the people who go click through.
So do people who click on...
I mean, people don't click through have zero conversion rate.
Right. But what about, do people who click through in the first position, do they buy more often than people who click through in the 10th position?
What's the first? Oh, higher up versus... I don't know. It probably varies. Probably varies by what they're looking for.
Yeah. Earlier in life, my instinct said that, if you click through the first ad, you're probably more likely to buy. Because someone who clicks on like the 10th ad, they're probably like a window shopper. They're just looking around. They're researching, whatever. They're not going to buy. But the shocking statistic that I've learned in life is that click-through rate and conversion rate are independent.
Huh.
So yeah, it's kind of surprising, but in a lot of different scenarios, I have seen that this situation plays out to be true, that regardless of if you click the first or the 20th ad, doesn't really matter. Once you've arrived at the page, I guess the explanation is you start to make your decision based on what you're seeing there. So, just because someone is in the first position, once you arrive at their site, you are going to make your decision independent of whether or not you were browsing or picking the top person or not.
Yeah, but my question is why?
The only thing I can guess is that it's because during search, you're looking for sites and stuff like that. And once you arrive at the page, it's like walking into a store and you make up your decision anew. So, some people are like, I need an emergency. I got to buy something. I'm here now. This is where I'm at. I'll buy it. But other people who click wherever you are on the page, they're like, this site is terrible, or I don't like their pitch or whatever, and you don't actually end up buying. But basically, like, where you started from doesn't impact the ultimate purchase. It's once you arrive at the place that's going to do the commerce.
But you're saying it has no function? I mean, if you never click through, you're not going to convert.
No, of those who
So
click
I don't
through.
understand.
Of those who click through.
Of those who click through.
Conversion rate's constant, regardless of the rank.
But they're not actually knowing how many times they click through. They could have clicked through to 5 sites. They search for a plumber. But usually I price compare at least 3 different options.
Well, I think that makes you exceptional based on the statistics I have.
Well, not everything. For example, Amazon, like toilet paper. I can't price compare on 3 different websites for toilet paper. That would take too long. But I do price compare for 3 different toilet papers on Amazon.
Wow. Okay.
It's awful.
Yeah, I can tell.
For someone to say like, it's independent, if they were actually tracking how many times I checked on different websites, you would know I price compare to 3. So I do think my click-through rate is correlated to purchase.
So maybe for you, and maybe you're a rare exception, or maybe that nets out in the data, that after that, people make random decisions about what vendor to use, and of all the people like you, it's just kind of a uniform distribution.
Is that what you're finding?
I mean, that's harder for me to give evidence of, but that would be my assumption, yeah.
I mean, here's my question. I feel like if we go through and did a math about like how much money you spend online versus me online, does the person who spends more online with more buying power do more of that type of shopping?
Yeah, but what does more mean? Like, if you include my Amazon Web Services bill, I obviously spend more than you online.
I think because you seem to make fewer purchases but bigger purchases. So I think in the end you probably have more buying power. As in you just spent more money overall.
Well, anyway, I think we've exhausted our conversation about click-through rates. My conjecture here in electing to talk about click-through rates is that I think the very nature of click-through rates as a metric, while well-founded in theory, is one of the reasons why we have fake news today. Because if you can get clicks, your content will rank more highly, because algorithms think that your content is better. Whereas maybe it's just that your headline is more sensational, not necessarily that your content is better. But on the source page, all you share is that headline.
Sure.
So if you write a sensational headline like, click here and get $200 for free, yeah, sure, people are going to click on it.
Of course, yeah. So you're hinting that we created this system of fake news. Is that what you're saying?
Essentially, yes, that all humans are to blame.
Well, this episode is called Click-Through Rate, not where did fake news come from. So I think that should be tackled in another episode.
All right, well, we'll talk next time about something called quality score.
Okay, we'll see.
All right, and that'll round this out a little bit. Until then, thanks as always for joining me, Linda.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thanks for listening to Data Skeptic, where the news may be fake, but the data doesn't lie. Support the show and find extended materials at dataskeptic.com.